I had long believed that my life would be one of parchment, ink, and solitude. After all, what more could a scholar like me wish for, after the world had already proved that love was a fleeting, treacherous thing? My name is Jinyu, 27 this spring, and though I was praised in the capital for my wit, for my diligence in the emperor's examinations, for my essays that once caught the eye of senior officials, I had grown weary. Weary of politics, weary of masks, weary of men, and weary, most of all, of heartbreak. Dong. Even now, the name tasted bitter, like tea that had been steeped too long. He had been kind at first, attentive. His smile promised me constancy, his words promised me truth. But beneath that promise was rot. I discovered too late that he had another lover, a woman whose name he would not even speak to me. Worse, he lied to himself. He would not even accept that he desired men. I was his shadow, his secret, his shame. And I was a fool, clinging to the belief that perhaps this time I would be enough. The memory of his betrayal had carved something into me, something jagged that caught even on the gentlest of hopes. That was why I left the capital, why I returned to the village of my birth, a small, quiet place where the cicadas sang louder than any gossip, and where the mountains curved like sleeping dragons around us. I told myself I would be content. I would write poems no one would read, stroll through bamboo groves, and perhaps let the years wash me away like stones at the riverbed. I had no wish to try again. Love was a battlefield, and I had already bled enough. That morning, the air was heavy with the perfume of summer. The cicadas droned in the distance, and the sun had just begun to climb, gilding the roofs of the village houses. I carried a small bundle in my hands, a clean robe, a bar of soap carved by the village herbalist, and a towel I had stitched myself years ago. The public stream lay just outside the village, tucked between two ridges. Its waters were fed by the mountain spring, clear, cold, and pure. I had bathed there countless times as a child, splashing with cousins or later, alone, when I wanted to think. That morning, I thought I would be alone again. I slipped out of my robe, folding it neatly on the rock, and stepped into the stream. The chill of the water bit at my skin, but I welcomed it. It was honest, unpretending. Unlike men. Unlike promises. I dipped beneath the surface, the world going silent in an instant, then rose again with a gasp, shaking droplets from my hair. I let myself float, closing my eyes, feeling the current tug at me gently. And then, a voice. Low, amused, startlingly close. You bathe without caution. What if someone were watching? My eyes snapped open, and I turned. There, only a few paces away, the water lapping at his chest, was a man. But not just any man. He was radiant. His black hair, long and wet, clung to his broad shoulders. His features were sharp yet elegant, the kind of beauty poets wasted lifetimes trying to capture. His lips were curved into a faint smile, not mocking but knowing. And his eyes, dark, unreadable, glinting with something that made my breath catch. I froze. My first instinct was shame. I had intruded. But no, this was the public stream. He was the intruder. Forgive me, I managed, bowing awkwardly even as the water lapped against my chest. I did not know anyone else was here. You may stay, he said, and the command in his tone was undeniable, though his words were generous. Something about the way he carried himself, the stillness, the authority in his voice, made my heart race. He was no ordinary traveler, no ordinary villager. And then, with sudden clarity, I recognized him. My blood turned to ice. The Emperor, Chunlei. I had seen him once, years ago, from afar, when I had been summoned to present an essay in the capital. He had sat upon the dragon throne, distant, untouchable, terrifying in his majesty. And now, he was before me, naked to the waist, the water beating on his skin, the dragon scar etched across his shoulder blade as proof of his identity. I wanted to flee, to sink beneath the water and let the current carry me far, far away. But I could not move. He watched me, his lips curving slightly more. You know who I am. My throat tightened. Yes, Your Majesty. Then you understand, he said softly, stepping closer through the water, that having seen me here, you must take responsibility. My mouth fell open. Responsibility? He tilted his head, his gaze piercing into mine. A man does not stumble upon his sovereign in such intimacy and simply walk away unchanged. Do you think fate is so careless? I had no answer. My heart pounded, and the water suddenly felt too shallow, as if it could no longer hide me. Chunlei moved closer still, until the space between us was barely an arm's length. I could see the droplets clinging to his lashes, the faint scar at his temple, the strength coiled in his frame. "I want you," he said simply. The words crashed into me like thunder. My lips parted, but nothing came out. "You will come to the palace," he continued, as if declaring the weather. "You will bear me a child." His eyes softened, though the authority in them never waned. "And you will be loved." Loved. The word struck the deepest wound in me. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. How could he promise such a thing? He, an emperor, who could have any concubine, any beauty in the land. Why me? A scholar who had turned his back on court, a man whose heart had already been broken beyond repair? My voice trembled as I finally managed. "Your Majesty, surely you jest. I am no consort. No woman. No." He silenced me with a single step closer. The water rippled around us, binding us in the same current. "I never jest," he said, his voice low, dangerous, and yet strangely tender. I shivered, not from the cold, but from the weight of his gaze. Fate, it seemed, had not abandoned me after all. It had simply been waiting. When I returned home that morning, my body was clean from the river, but my mind was drenched in confusion. The emperor's words clung to me like the dampness of my robe. "You will bear me a child, and you will be loved." I must have walked the same narrow path twice before I even realized I had missed my gate. The villagers passed me with curious glances, though none dared to speak. Who was I, after all? Just Jinyu, the scholar who had once gone to the capital and returned too soon, as if chased back by invisible wolves. Inside my small study, scrolls lay scattered across the desk. I sat before them, dipping my brush into ink, but the characters blurred into nothing. How could I write when I still felt the emperor's eyes upon me? How could I breathe when his presence had filled the air like thunderclouds ready to burst? I told myself it was absurd, that he had spoken in jest, or perhaps in some fleeting fancy that would vanish by tomorrow. After all, why would an emperor lower himself for someone like me? And yet, even as I tried to convince myself, a strange warmth flickered in my chest. A dangerous warmth. "No," I told myself firmly, setting down the brush. "Do not fall again. Do not be a fool for promises." But fate, it seemed, had already decided I would not escape so easily. The summons arrived that very evening. A rider in crimson livery stopped before my gate, dust rising around his horse. He dismounted, bowed briefly, and held out a scroll sealed with the imperial dragon. "By decree of His Majesty, Emperor Chunlei, Scholar Jinyu is to present himself at the palace by dawn tomorrow." My hands trembled as I accepted the scroll. The messenger did not linger. He mounted again and galloped off, leaving me with the heavy silence of inevitability. I broke the seal. The parchment was simple, the words few. "You saw me. Now you belong to me. Do not refuse." No signature was necessary. Sleep abandoned me that night. I paced the floor, heart in turmoil. To refuse was impossible. The emperor's decree was law. Even the boldest official would not dare defy it. But to accept, was that not to chain myself willingly? To risk once again the pain of loving someone far above me, someone whose power could crush me like an insect? And yet, a traitorous part of me longed to see him again. To hear his voice, to feel the way his presence swallowed the world until nothing else existed. By the time dawn painted the horizon, I had resolved nothing. But I dressed in my scholar's robes, tied my hair neatly, and waited. The carriage that came for me was lacquered in black and gold, the dragon emblem glaring at me from every angle. Guards flanked it, their armor gleaming even in the morning mist. As I climbed inside, I whispered to myself, "Thread carefully, Jinyu. Play the fool if you must. If he truly means to love you, let him prove it." The horses surged forward, carrying me toward the palace, toward my fate. The palace was as I remembered, vast, intimidating, beautiful in a way that could crush a man's spirit. The vermilion gates loomed overhead, the golden roofs blazing beneath the rising sun. Eunuchs and servants scurried like ants, each movement precise, each word hushed. I was led not to the hall of supreme harmony, nor to any courtly chamber, but through winding paths to a secluded garden. There he was, Chunlei. The emperor stood by a lotus pond, dressed in robes of midnight blue embroidered with silver dragons. His hair was bound with a golden crown, yet the sight of him was no less arresting than it had been in the stream. If anything, he looked even more untouchable now, a god clothed in human form. And yet his eyes softened the moment they found me. "You came," he said. As if I had a choice, I replied before I could stop myself. His lips curved into that faint, knowing smile. "There is always a choice." but few dare take it. I bowed low, hiding the turmoil in my face. Your Majesty, I am but a humble scholar. Surely you do not mean what you said yesterday. I am unworthy of. Enough. His voice cut through the air, sharp but not cruel. Do you think I, an emperor, would waste my breath on jest? When I said you will be mine, I meant it. He stepped closer, his gaze locking onto mine. I tried to look away, but failed. Why me? I whispered, the question escaping before I could swallow it. For the first time, his expression softened completely. Because when you looked at me, he said quietly, you did not see an emperor. You saw a man. And I have been a man too long without being seen. My chest tightened. The sincerity in his voice threatened to undo me. Still, I could not yield so easily. Not when my heart bore the scars of betrayal. I cannot trust so quickly, I said, forcing steel into my tone. If you wish me to believe your words, you must prove them. Love is not a command, Your Majesty. It must be earned. Instead of anger, he laughed softly, a sound like velvet, dangerous yet warm. Then I shall earn it, he said. Before I could retreat, his hand rose, fingers brushing lightly against my cheek. The touch was gentle, reverent, and yet it burned through me like fire. Jinyu, he murmured, my name on his lips like a vow. I will not let you go. And then he kissed me. When I awoke the next morning, the first thought that struck me was not of the palace walls or the guards stationed outside my chamber. It was of him. His kiss still lingered on my lips like a phantom. A kiss that had been both a command and a plea. I pressed a hand to my mouth, heat flooding my cheeks. What have I allowed? The palace was no place for tenderness. I had seen it once, in my days as a scholar. The endless intrigues, the shifting loyalties, the way affection was twisted into power. And yet, when Chunlei's lips touched mine, I had not felt like a pawn. I had felt seen, desired, dangerously so. The eunuch assigned to me, a thin, sharp-eyed man named Wei, entered quietly with a bow. Scholar Jinyu, His Majesty requests your presence at the breakfast pavilion. My heart lurched. Already, I dressed carefully, choosing the plainest robe among those provided to me. The silks were too fine, too loud. I wanted no whispers that I was flaunting favor. But I could not hide the trembling in my hands as I tied the sash. The breakfast pavilion overlooked the lotus pond. Chunlei was already there, seated casually with one leg drawn up, a far cry from the stern emperor who had presided over the throne. He looked younger, somehow, though no less commanding. When his eyes found me, his entire face softened. You're late, he said, though his smile betrayed amusement. I had not yet grown used to being summoned at dawn, I admitted. Then you must learn, he said smoothly, for I intend to summon you often. Heat climbed my neck. I bowed to hide it, taking my seat across from him. The meal was elaborate, steamed buns, congee, delicate pickled vegetables, but I found myself too tense to eat. Chunlei noticed. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. You're afraid. Wouldn't you be, if you were in my place? I said before I could bite my tongue. His smile curved, slow and dangerous. You dare speak so boldly. I speak truth, Your Majesty. I am but a scholar, plucked from my village and placed beside a man who commands nations. How am I to believe your intentions are not fleeting? The words hung in the air. Silence. Then, softly, he said, because you are the first to question me to my face. My eyes widened. You think me surrounded by honesty? He asked. No, Jinyu. Every smile here hides a dagger. Every word is calculated to please. But you, he reached across the low table, taking my hand before I could withdraw. His palm was warm, steady. You look at me as though I am a man who must prove himself. And I find that intoxicating. My breath caught. His thumb brushed lightly over my knuckles, and the world seemed to narrow to that single touch. Eat, he murmured. You will need strength for the day. Strength for what? I dared not ask. By midday, whispers had already begun. I heard them in the corridors, hushed voices of servants carrying trays, of eunuchs polishing lanterns. The emperor summoned him again? So bold, to bring a man into the inner palace. Perhaps he will tire of him as quickly as the others. Their words stung, though I kept my face serene. That evening, Chunlei led me to a secluded chamber, his private study. The room smelled of ink and cedar, scrolls stacked neatly upon shelves, a brush still wet on the desk. Do you miss your books? He asked, noticing how my gaze lingered on the scrolls. I miss the silence, I admitted. He chuckled, stepping close. I can give you silence. And then his lips were on mine again. This kiss was different, deeper, hungrier. My hands trembled at my sides, torn between pushing him away and pulling him closer. When he drew back, his breath mingled with mine. "Do you doubt me still?" My voice was hoarse. "Yes." Instead of anger, he laughed softly. His forehead rested against mine, his hand sliding to my waist. "Then I shall keep kissing you until you believe." The palace was a place of golden cages. Beautiful, gleaming, suffocating. I told myself I was not caught in one. That I was only here because I had no choice. That the Emperor's summons was as binding as any chain. But the truth gnawed at me in silence. I had not resisted. Not when he kissed me. Not when he held my hand as though it belonged nowhere else. I was betraying myself, piece by piece. That night, Chunlei summoned me again. This time, not to the study, not to the garden, but to his private chambers. The eunuch who escorted me looked everywhere but my face, his silence heavy with meaning. When he slid the doors open, the air inside was scented with sandalwood and warm silk. Chunlei stood by the window, the moonlight outlining him in silver. His outer robe was cast aside, leaving only the inner layer that clung to his form. My breath faltered. He turned, and his gaze caught me like a snare. "You came." "As if I could refuse," I said quietly. "You could," he replied, stepping closer. "You always could. That is what makes you different." The words disarmed me more than his nearness. My pulse raced as he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. His fingers lingered, trailing down my jaw, and then his lips found mine again. This kiss was not a question. It was a claim. I should have resisted. I should have reminded him that love was not proven with touches and words alone. But the truth was, I was starved for this. For closeness, for warmth that did not carry shame. When his arms wrapped around me, I yielded. The night unfolded like silk unraveling, slow and inevitable. His kisses traced down my neck, his hands mapping the curve of my waist, my back. I clung to him, torn between fear and desire, between doubt and the aching need to be wanted. "Jinyu," he whispered against my skin, his breath hot, his tone reverent. "Mine." My heart stuttered. For once, I did not argue. But morning brought no peace. The whispers grew louder. I heard them in the corridors, the courtyards, the very air itself. The Emperor favors him. A man, no less. An insult to the noble houses. He will not last long. They never do. Every word was a dagger I tried to ignore. But I could not ignore the looks, sharp, scornful, mocking, from ministers, from consorts, from servants whose tongues were bound but whose eyes were not. By midday, I was summoned not by Chunlei, but by the Empress Dowager herself. She sat upon a dais in the hall of pure light, her figure draped in heavy brocade, her eyes sharp as hawks. "So," she said coolly, "you are the scholar who has captured His Majesty's attention." I bowed low, my pulse thundering. "Your grace flatters me. I am nothing more than a servant of the throne." "Do not feign humility," she snapped. "Do you think the palace blind? Do you think we do not see how he summons you, how he dismisses others for your sake? You are a danger." I lifted my gaze just enough to meet hers. "I am no danger, your grace. I seek nothing. Enough." Her voice cracked like a whip. "You will learn. Favor is a flame. Beautiful, warming, and deadly when it burns too bright." Her warning echoed long after I left. That evening, Chunlei found me sitting by the lotus pond, my thoughts heavy. "You are troubled," he said simply, sitting beside me. "The palace hates me." I confessed before I could stop myself. "Let them," he said. I turned to him, startled. "Do you think their whispers matter? They have always whispered. Today about you, tomorrow about someone else. Only my word is law." "But words can change," I said softly. "Even your word." For the first time, hurt flickered in his gaze. He reached out, tilting my chin up until our eyes locked. "Do you think me like the others who betrayed you?" His voice was low, dangerous, yet tinged with vulnerability. "Do you think I will cast you aside?" My chest tightened. "I do not know. Then I will show you." Before I could ask what he meant, he rose, pulling me with him. The following morning, during the court assembly, he did something unthinkable. Before ministers, generals, and nobles alike, he announced, "Scholar Jinyu is under my protection. None will slander him. None will touch him. He is mine." The hall erupted in murmurs, outrage, disbelief. And I, standing at his side, my heart pounding, realized there was no escape now. I was the Emperor's shadow, for better or for ruin. The weeks that followed Chunlei's public declaration were both a dream and a nightmare. On one hand, he spared no moment to prove his words. His presence wrapped around me like silk. He summoned me to meals, to private gardens, to nights where the candlelight flickered as our lips tangled, as his hands drew fire from my skin. He laughed more freely with me than he ever had with others. He told me of his loneliness, of the burden of the dragon throne. And when we were alone, he whispered my name as if it was prayer. But the palace is not a place that allows love to bloom unchallenged. Every day, whispers sharpened into blades. Nobles sent petitions demanding he abandon me. Concubines feigned illness, hoping to draw his gaze. Ministers muttered of dynasties ruined by unnatural affections. And through it all, the Empress Dowager watched. Her eyes followed me at every ceremony, her silence heavier than thunder. I knew something was coming. It came on a night when the moon was thin and the wind restless. A servant delivered me tea in my chambers. Too sweet. Unnatural. My hand froze midway to my lips. A memory returned, the Empress Dowager's warning. Favor is a flame, deadly when it burns too bright. I set the cup aside, untouched. Moments later, Chunlei entered, his eyes narrowing at the sight of the tea. He lifted it, sniffed once, and his jaw tightened. Poison, he said coldly. Rage rippled through him, but when his eyes turned to me, there was only fear. Fear of losing me. That was the night he claimed me again, not with anger, but with desperation. His kisses were fierce, his hands trembling as they held me, as though assuring himself I was still alive, still his. Do you see now? He whispered against my lips. They will kill you to take you from me. You cannot doubt me again, Jinyu. You are mine. Mine. Tears pricked my eyes. And if being yours destroys me, then I will destroy the world before it touches you. His vow was both terrifying and intoxicating. I surrendered that night. Fully. Completely. Our bodies entwined as though we had been carved for each other, every kiss deepening into fire, every breath stolen and given back. In his arms, I no longer felt like a scholar or a pawn or a shadow. I felt like Jinyu loved, claimed, cherished. The next morning, the Empress Dowager summoned us both. The hall was filled with ministers, nobles, and consorts, their eyes gleaming with expectation of my downfall. Your Majesty, the Empress Dowager said coolly, you endanger the throne with your indulgence. Cast this man aside, or risk the Empire's wrath. Chunlei rose from his seat, his hand closing firmly around mine. Enough, he thundered. I am the son of heaven. I decide the fate of this empire. And I decide that Jinyu remains at my side. Gasps rippled through the hall. He pulled me forward before the eyes of the court and pressed a kiss to my temple. Bold. Defiant. The Empress Dowager's face was unreadable, but I saw then what few others did, her defeat. The dragon throne bowed to no one. And I was bound to the dragon himself. That night, as we lay together beneath silk curtains, I whispered the words I had long withheld. I believe you now. Chunlei shifted, his gaze searching mine. Say it again. I believe you, I said, my voice steadier this time. And if fate wills it, I will bear your child. His breath caught, his hand tightening around mine. Then his lips captured mine with a hunger that was both tender and consuming. Jinyu, he murmured, his voice breaking. You are my fate. And in that moment, I knew I had been wrong all along. I had not come to the palace to die in solitude. I had come to live, to love, to stand at the side of the emperor, not as shadow, not as secret, but as his chosen. And perhaps one day, to hold in my arms the child of a love fierce enough to defy the world.